Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 23rd, 2018, 5:30 City Council meeting. I'll call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum, just barely, but we got one. Is there a minister who would like to say an invocation? I don't see any. Then please join me in a moment of silence. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is special recognitions and presentations. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, we'd like to first call up Rose Koning and Tracy Davis from the Harry T. Moore Center and Peggy Busaka. And another recognition for October is E.B. Bernetti, but she has had
her son's car broke down on I-95.
So
I know. She wishes she were here. It's my pleasure to read to you the nomination of Rose, Tracy, and E.B., all of who work at the Harry T. Moore Center. Each of these employees were individually dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Irma, when instead of dealing with what was happening at their homes and with their families, they came in to help during the hurricane event. They were immediately prepared to serve the community with the information they could in providing assistance to citizens who were looking for housing and other recovery efforts. Although the center did not serve as a disaster recovery station after this event, E.B., Rose, and Tracy filled the gaps and gathered all the information that was coming in over social and news media, so to ensure that information was available to the citizens who came to the center. Staff completed and faxed to the state over 500 applications for assistance in one day. Their efforts continued into the week, and each employee took different roles in providing these services. Tracy ensured adequate copies were made for all of the information. Rose distributed the information and faxed the applications, and E.B. assisted the citizens in completing their forms. Each employee went above and beyond their duties to ensure that the citizens of Titusville were provided all the key information and tools that they needed to help in their recoveries. So we congratulate them and thank them.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hey, Walt, how's
Good
it
to see
going?
you. Peg, you guys stand there and I'll stand here, and everybody look pretty. Thank you again for all that
Thanks.
you do.
Thank you. Thanks, Peggy. Thank you. Thank you.
And in the back of the room, we have Chief Lau, who will recognize Officer Robert Hicks, and the employee for the month of November is Sergeant John Cruz, who's out doing his duty right now, I would assume.
Yes, sir. Well, good evening, and on behalf of our city manager, it is our pleasure to introduce you to Officer Hicks. Officer Hicks is being recognized for several events as he's constantly going over and above. The first one was a retail theft out of Walmart. I don't know, a lot of folks might guess this, but Walmart is our #1 frequency for calls for service, and there's a lot going on there. So over the years, we've figured out exactly what is needed to prosecute. We got a call about a retail theft, and usually the loss prevention there is very squared away, and they get all the videos. However, Officer Hicks realized I have to get some more videos than they supplied. Recently, there was someone who made a plea saying, no, I did pay for it at one of the other exits. So lots of videos were obtained and gone through, so prosecution was able to happen. In addition, he also takes very, very close interest to our homeless population as well as at-risk juveniles. And specifically, Officer Hicks has been working with a foster family and a child who has been consistently running away. That is usually the very first step of a juvenile taking that wrong turn. And Officer Hicks has been able to locate the juvenile, sit down, and work out plans with mom and dad and the child. And that project has been going very, very well. But it's those two instances and many others that he is our representative for Officer of the Month or Employee of the Month for November.
Thank you so much. In the crowd, I'm short. Thank you, Ben.
If I could have our Assistant City Manager, Tom Abate, come up. We've got a group from Support Services to be recognized for the month of January. It'll be Veronica Krall. Becky, I can never say that last name. I can never say that.
Becky.
Everybody knows Becky. Connie Rose, Concythia Mack, Justin Kennedy, please. Kenny, please come up.
Well, I would say that we saved the best for last, but actually all the award winners this evening have done a fantastic job. But it's my pleasure as Support Services Director to acknowledge the hard work and perseverance that over the last 12 months that these fine individuals have put forth in rolling out our new ExecuTime timekeeping system. I'd also be remiss if I did not mention Amelia Robinson, who's also our internal auditor, done a great job in helping coordinate a lot of moving parts. So it's been a really all-hands-on-deck evolution, and there's been a number of challenges. The first, of course, is when you go into a new system. For years, we've done time cards on paper, and that's how everyone does their timesheets. Now we're going to digital world. We're actually getting a new software application that we're rolling out, and there's been a lot of resistance to change. Additionally, I'm getting chuckles from the and it's been a challenge. But also hardware. Our IT department has faced some challenges rolling out all the hardware involved, time clocks and all the new computers that we need to, servers that we need to implement to get this working. So we're 12 months into the process. The end of the light, the end of the tunnel is, the end of the light, whatever, it is near, and it's going to save hundreds of man hours and also save countless trees. No more paper time cards. So with that, we've got a great team here, and congratulations. Well deserved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why I got the bird on it? Thank you.
Next item is city investment policy revision.
On 10 July 2012, City Council approved revisions to the city's investment policy. In accordance with Section 218.415 Florida statute, the investment policy must be approved via resolution as presented on the consent agenda item at a regular City Council meeting on 23 January 18 at 6:30. So, Mr. Mayor, what this will be, you'll receive the presentation during the presentations meeting, and then this is a consent agenda item on the 6:30 meeting. So you won't be voting or anything on this one, but this is the presentation part for your consent.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Stitcher with PFM Asset Management. We are the firm that's responsible for managing the fixed income portfolio on your behalf. It's for your operating money. If I could quickly thank Bridget Clements for her help in making this happen. Bridget is a great partner and wonderful to work with. We appreciate the opportunity to interact with her. I also want to introduce you to a teammate of mine, Cody Rollerson. I do so because Cody is a resident of Titusville and graduated from Astronaut High. So I brought Cody along for the meeting tonight as well. So the reason I'm here again is to talk about some enhancements we've recommended to the investment policy. I want to be clear that this investment policy covers the operating assets of the city. It does not cover the OPEB, the other post-employment benefit plans. It does not cover pension plans. It does not cover bond proceeds. It is those assets that are required to be there to meet certain payments. So the policy is driven around safety, liquidity, and yield, all right, making sure that the money is there when needed. I put on the screen an overview of the recommendations. I want to focus on what I consider to be really the most important items, and that is the addition of 2 new sectors to the investment policy. And the main reason being is the 2 new sectors would really provide some additional tools in your toolbox, meaning other areas in which you can invest, which provides greater diversification in your portfolio, which ultimately has the hopefully intended benefit of reducing the overall risk of the portfolio and enhancing yield and return. So those 2 sectors we're recommending the addition of are what's known as asset-backed securities, as well as supranational securities. The reason behind this recommendation is really a reduced supply in agency securities and commercial paper. That reduced supply is really being driven by 2 things. One, a government mandate for agency securities to issue less debt and hold less debt on their balance sheet. We've seen a reduction in supply of roughly $1 trillion over the past 10 years in agency securities. The supranationals act as a proxy or a substitute for agency securities. Okay, so we're looking for other areas to invest similar to agency, provide us that opportunity. Additionally, commercial paper. There's less supply of commercial paper today, and this is being driven really by the Securities and Exchange Commission's money market reforms that went into place in the latter part of 2016. So basically what it means is there's less demand for commercial paper today, so therefore corporations are issuing less of it. And therefore there's less opportunities for us to invest your money. Asset-backed securities, again, act as a proxy or a substitute for commercial paper. So the main thing I failed to mention before we started is that the reason we do these recommendations and enhancements to the investment policy are twofold. One, the investment markets are always changing, ever evolving, all right? So you're sort of almost driven to have to do so because of the investment environment. And then additionally, the Government Finance Officers Association considers it a best practice. They recommend that you review and update as needed, at least annually. And so we are kind of, again, trying to follow what Government Finance Officers Association considers to be a best practice. And in doing so, it led us to these main recommendations. I'll also mention that one other enhancement is we are recommending increasing the maturity, recommended maturity from 5 years to 5.5 years for certain sectors. And then to take that a step further, we've also recommended putting a band around the maximum duration on the portfolio. And duration acts sort of as a risk measure for the overall interest rate sensitivity of your portfolio. So we want to cap that so you're not taking on unwanted interest rate risk in the portfolio. The idea behind the maturity is what we were finding is issuers were coming to market, the primary markets, with debt with final maturities of 5 years and 1 month or 5 years and 2 months. And it precluded us from being able to participate in those new issue markets, given that maturity limit of 5 years. So bumping it out to 5.5 years, again, expands the opportunity set in which you all can participate. And it's important in the new issue market to be able to do so. So I've thrown a lot at you there. A couple new sectors, new maturity, a duration band to reduce interest rate risk. Let me stop and just see what questions you might have.
Any questions from council?
Okay.
Apparently you're doing just fine.
Okay. Well, I don't really have a whole lot more. I mean, the thing to keep in mind is your policy follows the guidelines set by state statute. It will, after this enhancement, will include all the sections required by Florida state statute. It also will include all sections that would allow you really to be certified by what's called the Association of Public Treasurers of the United States and Canada. So just an extra set of eyes that kind of confirm that your policy contains everything that it should. And then lastly, the Government Finance Officers Association, again, best practices that your policy would include everything that's recommended by them. So with that, I don't have anything more to add. We hope you will consider these enhancements and approve them later tonight.
Thank you, sir, and
All
we'll
right.
vote on it at the next meeting.
Right.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Next item, comprehensive plan visioning presentation.
On 16 November 2017, Kane and Associates completed a series of visioning workshops with the public. The enclosed draft document and appendix summarizes their findings. The evaluation and appraisal report with recommended changes to the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan will be based on their findings summarized in the visioning document. We have a presentation that will be given to council, and the recommended action is that you accept this presentation and approve the visioning document. Brad?
Thank you. As you're well aware, we did a series of workshops to help get public input to help us guide where we want, what kind of policies we want to amend, or which policies we want to amend inside our comprehensive plan. Just to give you some background and remind you about why we're doing this. We have a comprehensive plan. It's a legal document that tells us how we're supposed to grow, everything that we do and present to you as far as any land use or rezoning changes, for example, have to be consistent with this document. And we have to update it every 7 years. So we decided this time around to go a step up and kind of get the public's input through a visioning exercise. We hired Kane & Associates out of Orlando to come out and work with the public. They held 3 workshops in October and November. They were very positive workshops. We had a lot of great input from the public there, and they were very interactive. And I believe a couple of council members were able to make it and participate. So what we're asking you tonight is, after hearing the presentation of the final vision document as a result of those workshops, it summarizes all the input that we got from the public. We're going to ask you to adopt that document, and that will help us move into the next phase of the project, which is the actual amending the policies of the comprehensive plan. And that will be brought to you in a draft form later on this year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our consultants, Brian Kanan and Eliza Harris with Kanan Associates.
Thank you, Brad. Mayor and council, good evening. I'm Brian Kanan. This is the completion of the first step in our assignment, and I can truly say it's been a delightful experience, and we've been blessed with a tremendously active and dedicated group of stakeholders that's added tremendously to the work. And most importantly, the staff has been very efficient and very supportive, and you've got a great staff. And we really enjoyed working with them.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Eliza Giuliano, who heads our planning studio. And I'll hang around a little bit, and she's going to lead most of this presentation.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here tonight. I am Eliza Harris Giuliano, so everybody was right. It really has been a pleasure to work with both your staff and your citizens over the last several months to develop this vision. And we want to start off with something a little bit fun that you'll find in the document. When we create one of these visions, what we're really trying to do is tell the future. We're trying to work with your citizens to tell the future story that we want to be the outcome. So we did that quite literally in this newspaper from 2027. And just to highlight a couple pieces of that, in 2027, Titusville has developed a vibrant, growing economy thriving on redevelopment in the older neighborhoods, the downtown, and on the major roadways leading into town. And skipping down to the finale, downtown itself, where we are today, is the shining face of Titusville with its exciting and beautiful new public squares and urban parks that host many community events and activities catering to all ages, as well as visitors who consider Titusville an interesting destination to visit. So certainly some of those things are already true and need to be enhanced, and a couple of those things are gaps that your citizens identified that we'd like to see change in the future. So what we're going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about is, one, how did we get here? How did we get to this vision? And two, how do we get there? How do we get to 2027 and make this vision a reality? And that'll go forward into the second phase, but we're starting to make some of those recommendations now. So this vision really had three key parts that I'm going to go into in varying levels of detail. The first one is the downtown, and that we separated into the downtown core as well as a secondary area. And all three of these I'm going to get into more depth a little bit later. Then we looked at the waterfront itself. We know that's a really unique asset to have 6 miles of waterfront on the Indian River. And finally, the gateways. And those gateways are really how most people first experience the city. They're these major roadways, Garden Street, South Street, Cheney Highway, and US 1, that are often people's first encounter and first visual encounter with the city. So we worked with citizens through 3 different sessions, 2 workshops, and a final results presentation. In that first workshop, we talked about the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities within the city. We shared those that we identified as consultants, as outsiders, and we asked citizens to talk in detail about what they saw as the strengths and weaknesses today in the city. We also conducted a community values survey, and this is an example of one of the slides that we used. So you'll see these pop up again throughout the presentation. Wherever you see a green box at the bottom left, that's good. Green is good, red is less good.
And you know, you're going to see a number on there, which is a compilation of about 2,700 individual data points. That's how much activity there was. And if you see anything close to a 4, that's as high as it ever got. And if it got to be a -3, that was about as low as it ever got.
Yep. So this is a 3.5, and the other number means it was the 13th highest voted slide within, I think, over about 150 slides that we had. So that was the first workshop. During the second workshop, we shared the results of those exercises with everyone who attended, and you have those results in detail in the appendices of the report. We also talked about the value of place-based design and why this is something that you might want in your city. And finally, we engaged in 3 tabletop exercises because by this point we had identified those 3 focus areas. And so we wanted the members of the public and the stakeholders in the room to really engage deeply on those 3 topics. So I'm going to give you a very, very brief version of that value discussion that we had. And really what it was how does thinking about these types of things, how does thinking about place create value in different ways throughout your community? So one of the ways is by creating spaces in your community that engage people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. And we know that the types of spaces, for instance, on the left, we can create great spaces for children that are also aesthetically pleasing. So it doesn't have to be a choice, an either or, between making one group comfortable in a space and making some other group uncomfortable. And we also know that walkability is important to people at both ends of the spectrum and everyone in between. We also know that that creating great places attracts business, and attracts it in at least two different ways. One is it attracts customers. All of your retailers in the downtown area want people to come downtown so that they'll be more likely to patronize their businesses or wherever in the city they're located. And the second reason is we see more and more that, that offices want to locate in places that their employees will enjoy being, places that they can go on a walk to lunch, places that have value in and of themselves rather than having to be an isolated location where they feel disconnected from the community. And finally, places for the community itself. The heart and soul of a community is where and how it gathers together, and creating opportunities to make those connections. And that can be really important in creating social capital. It can be important in creating connections among your citizens, and that results in all sorts of positive benefits for the community. So that was the very brief version. We went into a lot more detail at the meeting. So the key takeaways from all three meetings. The first, I'm going to share with you what we took away as consultants and some of the ideas that we offered, and then what the citizens told us loud and clear. So the key points that we offered at the meetings, and these were confirmed by the citizens, that the city and its tax base is growing quite slowly, and this is an issue of concern for the city budget, and it's an issue of concern in the long term. But the good news is there's a favorable regional context. There's a lot of regional growth happening, and there's no reason that Titusville can't be part of that. But to do that, the city has to grow smartly, particularly with a focus on quality redevelopment and infill, because the city isn't a large municipality with a lot of greenfield that they can grow new communities on. In fact, redevelopment is going to be the primary growth mode for the city over the next 10 years. And finally, that this kind of placemaking, as I just talked about, creates economic, fiscal, and social value. That means it creates economic activity within your community, it positively impacts the city's bottom line, and it creates that social value by connecting people. So what were the top level things the citizens told us that we didn't already know? We heard loud and clear that Titusville stakeholders value the small town feel and character of Titusville and want to maintain that going forward. We also heard that the waterfront was a super important asset and that the historic downtown was an asset that they valued. And finally, we learned that the stakeholders here, as Brian mentioned earlier, are really engaged and passionate. We saw the same people continue to be invested in the process and be willing to provide their feedback. We also want to make sure that as we're doing a process like this, that we take into account the planning that's been done before, and we're not starting from scratch unnecessarily. So there was a plan done by the University of South Florida for the city of Titusville that focused on quality redevelopment in the downtown, and we think this is very consistent with the outcome of the vision. So the 4 key things that they identified as part of that study are listed within the vision report, but they're creating a sense of place downtown. They're making the streets welcoming, particularly for pedestrians. They're encouraging a variety of activities and mixed-use development in downtown and attracting daily users. That's tech talk for attracting more customers and attracting more residents. So with all of that input that we got from the previous studies, from studying the city ourselves, and from the stakeholders, we now offer you this 3-point vision, starting with the gateways. So those gateways, as I mentioned earlier, are Garden Street, South Street, Cheney Highway, and US 1. And so we use that community value survey. You'll see the red and green boxes here to identify what people might want those gateways to look like and the things they absolutely don't want those gateways to look like. And there's more to those in terms of urban design, landscape, and the kind of economic activity that might be possible. So to look at a negative example, the very driving-oriented kind of ill-equipped strip mall that we see in a lot of cities across the United States got a very, very negative score. In contrast, we see a more modern, updated retail environment, even on a major roadway, can be quite welcoming when you include urban design components and landscape components that make it comfortable for people. And so we applied this at a number of different scales. We looked at the possibilities for a larger site that could accommodate what we call a multi-way boulevard. Essentially, that means we have an extra traffic lane that is very slow and accommodating for people who are just trying to get to their destination in a car, maybe even cyclists, and people walking. That gets you a little bit away from that major higher speed roadway. Where that's not possible, there's also great urban design solutions like the one that we looked at before that help provide a little bit of distance and buffering from that major roadway and provide a positive architectural environment. And finally, even on small sites, there's a lot that we can do to create a more attractive, welcoming environment on these major gateways that'll both be that'll be positive at a small scale when you're walking down the street, but also create a good image for the city as people are entering in. The second key is the waterfront. Now this we heard a lot about. People are really excited and really concerned about the waterfront. And so we recognize two major themes here. One is protecting it, and the other is enhancing it. So protecting it means making sure that the environmental conditions are good, that we're improving the river, the water quality in the river over time. And the second, enhancing that, has to do with making sure people enjoy the riverfront, that they have access to it. That's also an important value for the citizens.
And the other thing that was very powerful when people started interacting was the idea of these recreation trails. And they really liked a nature setting to it. And so what could be amazing is when you combine that type of activity that was very, very highly rated with the waterfront in places, and we think that's possible.
So
that's a very high score, the 4 there.
And of course you have this huge, these huge incoming trail projects at several different points within the city, and connecting that to the waterfront has huge value. So what do they do when they get here? Well, we want to make sure that they have a great view for starters. And so
this one's fun because this is an existing trail, if you will, on the waterfront, and we could envision a lot more of this, and then we took the liberty of enhancing it, which is the next slide. So when you do that, suddenly there's a real magical quality to this, and really it's as simple as landscaping and creating shaded walks for people to bike and walk, and that really resonated with a lot of people.
And as somebody who rides a bike sometimes, that shade is going to be really valuable for a lot of the year in Florida. And we also looked at examples of how the trail can be really well integrated into a more urban setting, like connecting to the downtown. This is a great example from Winter Garden, which is on the other side of Orlando from Titusville, that they've integrated that trail to be a huge value generator for their downtown, partially by integrating it right into their main street.
It actually was the main driver of the redevelopment, very successful redevelopment of Winter Garden.
So we also identified a variety of different activities that could happen along this waterfront, and we identified 2 different phases. The big picture that might not be the 2027, maybe it's the 2050, is connecting that full waterfront along the entire 6 miles, but we wanted to identify a really attainable, still of a stretch goal, but an attainable first phase, which is that 1.5-mile initial phase. Now, within that area, there's a significant amount of land that the public already owns, and so it's a matter of connecting the dots. So that's something we really think is achievable.
Some of the public land is city land, but quite a lot of it is other public agencies, county, and so forth. So we were excited about that because that could be a viable first phase of really opening up the waterfront in a positive way.
And it also connects a number of existing parks, so you've got existing assets that you can take advantage of there. And we looked at different activities that could happen. Of course, the waterfront itself, the trail itself is an important aspect, but that trail might also take on different characters over the course of that 1.5 miles. In this instance, it could go from being more of an off-road trail to being a waterfront boardwalk where space may be at a premium. Might even have to go away from the water at points to work around different properties. We know that there's an existing marina, but there's been talk that there might even be an opportunity for a second marina somewhere within that waterfront area, but connecting that marina is part of this as well. We heard from people in different communities who are fans of boating, that very often what they'd like to be able to do is actually pull up to a restaurant. And that is something that may be the difference between them eating in Titusville or taking their restaurant dollars back home where they've parked their boat. Fishing, of course, always a popular thing at the waterfront, but do you have the opportunities to go fishing at that waterfront if you don't own a boat? And then incorporating into these parks and publicly owned areas appropriate vendors. So that could be directly water-related vendors, such as a kayak rental in this instance. But we also talked about food vendors and other things that would encourage people to want to spend time on the waterfront. And of course, the very unique attribute that you guys have here is the ability to watch these amazing rocket launches from many points along your waterfront. So that's the waterfront. And the last of the three keys is the downtown. And as we mentioned, we divide that into the core and a secondary supporting area. So that...
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So the one way to define the core is we want it to be walkable. So that circle represents what you can easily walk within a 3 to 5 minute from the outside to the inside. So it's very compact. It's quite manageable. It's a very nice potential core for the town center.
And one of the major issues that we identified based on both our analysis and some of the results from the community value survey is that the existing transportation in downtown is a little bit difficult, particularly for pedestrians. And we know there's been some improvements made already, but it's a quickly changing landscape in the state of Florida in terms of what's possible in creating locally oriented environments, particularly along state roadways. The Florida DOT is becoming more and more oriented towards helping local governments achieve their vision instead of some cases making that a little bit more difficult, particularly with respect to enabling walking and cycling as viable ways of getting around. So there's a huge amount of other activities that we've identified as possible within that core area. Street festivals, this is one that's already happened. This is a picture from Titusville, and you have these on a fairly regular basis. So how do we continue and support that? One of the things that was identified as really missing was a community park. And you saw this image earlier. It got a very positive score as part of our community value survey. And it's something that isn't existing in downtown in a really robust way. And that building on that, once you have that, you can start to build different things onto it, including retail. And that downtown trail, we talked about the trail, but integrating that with downtown in a way that supports your local businesses is really important. And design can be part of that solution. Now we talked about the very core area. Now the secondary area is where you really would see the many residents that might be supporting that downtown directly in addition to those who come from outside, as well as other activities that might be possible, particularly on the north end of the core. We did a kind of simple land use analysis showing that the majority of that secondary area is residential, but on the north side there's the opportunity for more of a mix of uses, which could include small cafes, office buildings, and those can be done in a very integrated way into the fabric of the community. And then different types of residential. Certainly you already have many single-family homes in the secondary area, but even single-family homes can be done in a number of different ways at different densities, as well as other types of residential that might be integrated. And here's another example. Again, this is single-family, but at a little bit different scale. So at the last meeting, one of the things that we did was focus on key findings and strategies. And all of these got overall positive responses. But I want to focus on 4 that got that really came out of the gate as the top ones. And those are, they're ranked 1, 2, 2, 3, because there was a tie for second. So we asked people at that third meeting, do you think these initiatives will effectively reposition the city in a very positive way? And we got an overwhelmingly positive response on that. All 4 of these we got an overwhelmingly positive response on, and you can look at the actual numbers. but the city needs to develop an effective redevelopment and infill strategy. Remember, that was also in the USF study. That's something that we recommend as professionals, and it's something that the public that attended these meetings agreed with as well. That the city needs to reimagine these 3 key areas, so they validated that these 3 areas are a good place to focus. And finally, that downtown is a really important part of this picture, that it's an essential strategy for economic development. So that was all about phase 1. Now we're going to straddle the line a little bit between phase 1 and phase 2. So phase 2 is where we're going to be trying to instill this vision into the city's comprehensive plan. So we want to talk a little bit about comprehensive plans. So one thing that a lot of people, we take for granted here in Florida, but if you've worked in different places, you know that comprehensive plans exist all over the United States. But what's really unique in Florida is that they are legally binding. They really direct funding within the city, and they particularly direct development within the city with legal backing in a way that they do not in many other states around the country. And so big pieces of that the comprehensive plan deals with: regulating and guiding future private development. Second, directing the city to do further plans or update regulations. And finally, guiding public investment. So how do we make sure that our investments in transportation are supporting our vision for land use? How do we make sure that all of those different elements are coordinated? And it also is something that other levels of government will look at when they're offering grants, or for instance, the Department of Transportation will look at whether or not what you're asking them to do matches up with your comprehensive plan. So what are those elements? I mentioned that we're trying to get all coordinated. I won't read these all off to you, but we had one of the things that we actually did as part of our public engagement was to produce a little flyer that had a number of different pieces of information, but the most basic is letting the public know what's in the plan. So these are the elements that are in your current plan. And finally, as we're trying to go from phase 1 to phase 2, what are the questions that we need to ask as we're updating this comprehensive plan? The first question is the comprehensive plan preventing or discouraging the vision that we want? Is it actually getting in the way? The second question we would ask is, of course, if it's not getting in the way, is it helping? Is it helping to make that vision a reality? Another one is the city's infrastructure planning supporting the vision? So is the way the city's investing money comport with what it's telling private developers to do? What is telling the Florida Department of Transportation it wants? And finally, is this city's plan for growth supporting these other goals, like social engagement, the city's bottom line, providing citizens with opportunity and quality of life, those things that really are the reason that the city is here to serve its citizens in the first place? And of course, that's what we believe the vision is going to achieve. So what are the next steps? The obvious one is aligning the comprehensive plan with this vision that we've put forward in concert with stakeholders. And the 3 key pieces, how do we incorporate those into the comprehensive plan? Well, the first, the waterfront, we might have the comprehensive plan direct the development of a waterfront trail master plan, which is the next concrete step in seeing that vision realized. For the downtown, we might recommend a form-based code and redevelopment plan be developed. And finally, for the gateways, that's really the improvement potential there has a lot to do with design guidelines and encouraging improvements around urban design and landscape design within those gateways. And finally, making sure there's an integrated transportation and roadway plan that takes into account particularly the downtown, but integrating that with the city at large. So that's how we tied these 3 together and how we got there. And hopefully, if we met with your approval, how we will move forward with the comprehensive plan to see it realized.
And if there are any questions, we'll be happy to try and answer them.
That's great. Anybody have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What is a form-based code?
So a form-based code is a way of doing a zoning code that's particularly designed to support what we call walkable urbanism, which is not to say it's at the exclusion of walking or cycling or driving, but that generally our codes on file in many cities and towns are oriented primarily around keeping things apart and parking and things like that. And a form-based code is about how we actually build spaces where people want to be. And it has to address all those other things too, but it addresses that first.
Okay, I think I got it.
Any other questions? Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you for this. That's all. I know you guys did a lot of work, so I know we really appreciate it. In regards to the waterfront trail, I know that if I looked at it appropriately, it started all the way down south, went up to our downtown area. Have you guys investigated or looked into, I know there is a lot of public land, but what about like the private land and how did you guys go into that at all or kind of see what are some options?
No, that's really pretty detailed work. You have to really get into every parcel and what the dimensions are, and maybe the trail at times has to come and parallel US 1 and then go back in. So it's very detailed work. We looked at the first 1.5 miles in enough detail to get excited that it could be done without a lot of public acquisition of land. So that's about as far as we went.
Okay. Have you seen it? Have you seen any other cities that kind of dealt with that before, by chance?
Many cities around the United States, the waterfront is absolutely the biggest resource, and and a lot of them were industrial in use, when they were back 50 years and they're rediscovering the waterfront. And when they do that properly, the values go through the roof, and it becomes very place-oriented and very desirable.
Okay. Good, thank you. And then the other thing, I just want to say I really appreciate you guys mentioning the gateways. I was just saying this to my friend. It's like when you exit off of 95 onto 405, like that's a beautiful area. When you do it on Garden Street, like time and time again, it's always been so rough. And so I'm kind of really looking forward to seeing like what potential we have, especially in that area. So thank you again.
Anyone else?
Right here. I also want to thank you. I think it's outstanding. It gives us a real vision. You have all these ideas and thoughts, and now they're in one place, in one order, and I appreciate that. I would also second Member Stokel's thought that I think that they would agree when we all ran just last year. One of the big things, you didn't really have to run, you heard it anyway, was the gateways. I tell this story all the time, but as a football coach, recruiters come in to see our players. And the number of recruiters who used to come in, and it's getting so much better. And that's really one of the things I like to see. But they used to tell me how dead our town was. Now, this is 5+ years ago, but what a difference that gateway makes. They notice, people from Iowa and Indiana, et cetera. Something I wanted to note, it kind of hit me that key points from the meeting, and I kind of want to ask you for a clarification. The city and its tax base is growing very slowly. Is that saying that it's not fast enough, or is that just kind of a commentary that we're kind of a slow tax base grow?
Well, I don't remember the numbers, but it was pretty low percentage growth. And that sort of sends up a warning signal to us because, the city has continuing needs and you have to finance things on a continuing basis. And the answer is the good tax base that's growing. So that's sort of a signal. Go ahead, yeah.
And also, we compared it to the county as a whole and to other peer communities in the area, and Titusville was growing slower than most of those peer communities and definitely slower than the county as a whole.
Okay, and that's something we've certainly looked at. That's why it's probably, red flag or came up to me, but because we realize that our house values, our resale values are lowest or second lowest in the county with Palm Bay, and so we realize that's an issue. And I think that this council has worked very hard with some approvals for some increased tax base. And this is where it gets tricky because some of the statements are, we're growing too slowly, the tax base is too slow, and then on the next page there's, keep that small town feel. And sitting up here, it's kind of a balancing act that we want to grow, we want a tax base, we like the nice stuff, but we want that small town feel. And I get it. I don't want to live in Orlando. I don't want to even live in Melbourne. But we've got to be able to have some of that, and the between there is the grow smartly.
Yeah, the good news is you can absolutely have both. We're totally confident, that you can get beautiful additional growth and keep that feeling that you like to have almost a village scale. Totally possible.
And what you don't have that some competing communities have that we've worked in is a wall of condos on the waterfront that really separate you from the waterfront. And that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people are concerned about.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. It's a great vision, and I think we have something that's going to help it happen. You mentioned Winter Garden and their trail, and of course, I guess you know that we have a similar trail coming all the way over from St. Petersburg and ending here, and then another one going north and south probably the next few years, and then a loop out to the ocean as well. So that's going to bring a lot of people, because the downtown area will be the center of it, and we did go over to visit Winter Garden, and we got a vision from that as well, with the people coming in, and is what made them come back to life, and I think we're going to be very similar. We have a lot of things that they don't have. We have an ocean, we have a space center, we have things that they can see, so we're excited about the future, and thank you very much.
And I'd just like to say, we really value the opportunity to work with the city. It's been a delight, and we're excited to go on to the next stage.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I will accept a
move to accept.
Move to accept
Move
presentation
to accept
and
the
approval.
presentation and approve the vision document.
Second, motion is second. Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Passes unanimously. Letters of appreciation.
Yes, sir. We have one letter of appreciation this month, and it's for Mr. Brad Parrish right there, and the Community Development Planning Manager. So congratulations,
Hey, Brad. Anything else from council at this point? And let's see, we have petitions and requests. Do we have anybody that would like to speak at this point? Would you like to speak at this point?
Can't hear you. Very good.
How's that?
Much better.
Okay. Now, would you like to speak? No. Okay. If we have nobody speaking, this meeting is adjourned. The next meeting will start promptly at 6:30.